All right. So we're at 11 o'clock and we have a lot to cover. So we're going to go ahead and dive right in.
You're muted.
Yeah, I saw that. All right, we still have more people coming on, so I'll wait a little bit longer. But again, stretch a little bit. We've all been sitting down for quite a bit. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone. I'm Michelle Stewart. I'm part of a Chevron employee and I'm a president emeritus of our Pride Employee Network, which is our LGBTQ plus employee resource group. And today we're going to talk about the relevance of workplace benefits inclusivity for the LGBTQ plus workforce. We're going to guide you a bit on who the people are that are here for this session to kind of chat through our experiences of where we've been, where we're going, and we'll share a little bit of stories about some of the experiences that members of our workforce have experienced, and a bit about kind of what we're looking to continue to explore. And really, I hope you take away that it's about team building and it's about learning really through this journey. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start with some introductions. Matthew, will you go ahead and share with us who you are and kind of briefly what your diversity, your day job and kind of your relation to D&I and your role in the story that we're sharing today?
Sure, thanks, Michelle, and thanks everyone for attending. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. So my name is Matthew Yu. I've been with Chevron for just over 11 years now. Chemical engineering background. My current role, day job, is a global advisor for data and insights, supporting our supply chain organization. So I am just an employee. I have some involvement with some of our employee resource groups, but in general, my role in the story and what we plan to share today is that my husband and I wanted to start a family through IVF and surrogacy. And we were looking into options and on how to do this. And so as I learned more about what this journey entailed, I looked at the benefits that Chevron offered. And I just found that there were some gaps in coverage where it seemed that there was just no language around some of the things that I would have to go through. So I reached out to an executive to share some of my concerns, and he engaged the employee resource group, the Pride Network that Michelle referenced, and to create a task force to further understand what workplace needs there are and to recommend changes to leadership. So we'll be talking more about that later today in our conversation, but that's me, and I'll pass it over to Tony.
Hi all, I'm Tony Barrington. It's nice to be at the Out and Equal Summit again. I'm a corporate compliance analyst at Chevron in Houston, and I've been with the company about 3.5 years. I'm also the Houston Pride, also on the Houston Pride leadership team. And I'm here to share my story more around the mental health benefits and how, for me, it was important to find an employer who respects the mental health aspect of balance when it comes to life and work, but also an employer who openly supports the LGBTQ plus community. So I will share a little bit of more of my story and how Chevron was the right pick for me as an employer. On over to Heather, please.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here today, everyone. My name is Heather Quisenberry. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and work as a Chevron Employee Assistance Program, or EAP, advisor. I started my journey with Chevron in 2006 and worked in another capacity for about 12 years while working on my advanced degree. I left the company for a few years, and then earlier this year, I was fortunate enough to come back in this new role to a company that I believe practices what it preaches in terms of diversity and inclusion. My involvement in our D&I networks goes back several years. I was the site lead for the Enabled Network, which offers awareness of and support for people with disabilities. Due to my passion for mental health and stigma reduction, I also had a son that had a major mental illness and was trying to come to terms with his own sexuality in a homophobic world. So I joined the Pride Network and started on my own ally journey as a way to not only support him, but to elevate my own understanding of the issues that the LGBTQ populations face. My role in this story is twofold. I'm here because Chevron EAP and Work Life Services cares about its people. We are fortunate enough to work for a company that understands that people that are psychologically healthy and happy perform well and more safely. We care about the whole person. So as an ally and a mental health professional, I'm able to help the Chevron business, as well as employees, dependents, and retirees with the emotional challenges they face. It's not just a job for me, but also my passion. Over to Anne, I believe.
Great. Hello, everybody. Good day. I'm Ann Manna. I have over 30 years working at Chevron in various roles. My current day job is I lead the benefits organization globally for Chevron in terms of our strategy and design in over 50 countries. How I'm connected to D&I, I'm an ally. I'm a member of and support several different ERGs. I've engaged with our employee networks leadership team, as well as very specific ERGs in terms of understanding the population needs. And that's what my role in the story is this group engaged me in terms of understanding the needs of the LGBTQ plus population at Chevron. And we'll be sharing more about that journey today. Over to Michelle.
All right, thank you all. I hope all of you, our audience participants, has a good idea of kind of a bit why some of these folks were selected to speak today. And I'm really excited to share going forward. Before we dive into our kind of panel discussion, I want to share a bit about Chevron and kind of why we're here today. And a big part of the success of Chevron is the people. And that's why we have a lot of attention around ensuring that our people are healthy and happy. And it's called enabling human progress. We are a global workforce, as Anne mentioned, and we're headquartered in San Ramon, California in the United States. We follow what's called the Chevron way, and it's really to help us be the global energy company most admired for its people, partnerships, and performance. And we don't do this alone, right? So we partner as an ERG and as our workforce with our diversity inclusion organization, human resources, as well as health and medical. And we rely and we lean on our various policies, health and wellness benefits, and the various programs that we have. Chevron Pride, our employee resource group, was started actually in 1991 by a group of employees who knew that there was an opportunity. Today, we have 13 chapters across the world with about 2,000 members and climbing. We received 100% on the Human Rights Campaign Corporate Equality Index for 16 years in a row. And even back in 1993, we were the first oil and gas company to offer or to include sexual orientation and gender identity in our EEO. We extended domestic partner benefits back in 1998, as well as in some of our international locations, such as Manila. And we do have transgender guidelines and benefits that were actually featured in the Human Rights Campaign. And we're continuing to learn about that area as we execute those guidelines. Just kind of to note, we are 30 years of Chevron Pride here in 2021. And in the Pathable link, there's some links that will take you to kind of the feature we have that's available, so you can learn more and experience a bit about what it's like to be a Pride member at Chevron. A bit of our journey so far. So I will admit, the first time I really understood what resources are available or not available, and what is needed by the LGBTQ community in the ways of family planning during an Out and Equal session. I remember sitting down, it was when we were in person, and being able to listen to the panel discuss a bit about their journey. And I will tell you, it was eye-opening for me. And it kind of started something inside of me of wanting to understand, what is it like for our employees at Chevron? And when Matthew came to our manager, and then our manager reached out to myself, the pieces just kind of connected. And it was the opportunity to start exploring in this space. From there, we were able to meet with Anne and her team to truly understand, what does it look like to kind of assess what today looks like as far as LGBTQ inclusiveness when it comes to our benefits, and what other resources do we have existing today as far as work-life services that maybe we're not tapped into. And is there an opportunity to either highlight those or help shape them so they are more available to this community? Of course, we don't know everything about what our workforce needs. And so we did engage in an employee survey. We ended up utilizing our existing membership survey. So we ensured we were focusing on the right population. And the next step will be for us to evaluate the responses and sit down with the benefits team and talk about what we see. And again, discussions with folks like Matthew and Tony, and as well as our transgender benefits and guidelines is something that we're wanting to continue to explore. All right, so that's what I have as far as a presentation. And so really the best part about the human experience is human stories. And so I'm going to start with Matthew and have him share a bit about, what is your journey as it relates to researching family planning, such as surrogacy and various family options. Just kind of share with us where you've been and what you're looking forward to.
Sure, happy to do so. So I'll start with just, it took a lot of education to get started. I expected the process to be complicated and daunting, and it was. But fortunately, I had a coworker who recently knew someone as a gay man who recently became a parent of twins through IVF and surrogacy. So I had the opportunity to reach out to him and learn about a great nonprofit called Men Having Babies, which was a great resource in helping me understand what went into the process. Because before connecting with this resource, really my only touch point of surrogacy was the TV show Friends, when Phoebe carried her son's or her brother's 3 children through surrogacy. And the process is a lot more complicated, of course, than what is shown on TV. And so I just kind of want to walk you through what I've seen, and I'll break it up into a few different categories and some of the complexities in each part. So there's the medical portion, the surrogacy agency, legal, mental and emotional support, and financial. So I'll go through each of those one by one. So on the medical side, of course, being a gay man and having a husband, neither of us can carry a child. So we require medical assistance through an egg donor and IVF clinic. So we know IVF is a very expensive process in and of itself. But beyond that, we also have to do some additional things like genetic testing before we can even match with the donor, and trying to figure out what egg donor you want to select is like speed dating on steroids, because you see a bunch of medical information and other various things. But beyond that, you really have to engage with a very capable medical clinic. And how do you find one of those? So that was one of the challenges that we faced. Moving on to trying to identify a surrogacy agency. So they're completely separate entities from IVF clinics or fertility clinics, where they help match intended parents with surrogates around the country. And again, this is going to become a legal contract, and so there's a lot of additional steps and hurdles to go through. There's required psychological evaluation for intended parents to discuss things like, how do you talk to your future kids about how they came into this world? What sort of support network do you have? Because this is going to be a long and bumpy journey. And things that people that don't need assisted pregnancy, they don't need to talk about, things like selective termination, or yeah, so I won't get too much into that, I guess. And then getting into things like legal contracts. Which state are you in? Which state is the surrogate in? Does your insurance cover out-of-state pregnancies or births? Who's going to be the biological father? And how do you get your name on the birth certificate before or after the child is born? All these questions, there's a lot to go through, and it's just something I recognize that it's not enough to just talk about the medical benefits. There's all these other portions to it. When we get to things like mental and emotional support, just understanding the awareness of, are your children going to have a future relationship with the surrogate or the egg donor? So these are all kind of some of the challenges, but of course, the biggest hurdle is financial. How does one pay for this when you have very expensive medical treatments to consider, and on top of that, there are very expensive surrogacy agency costs and surrogacy compensation as well. So all these factors kind of play into how can we educate our benefits and HR to understand the needs of this specific situation. And of course, there are many others. So that's kind of the journey that I've been through so far, and talking with Michelle and people on this panel here, just to recognize, okay, here's some of the extent of the gap and the challenge, and what can we do now to address that.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. I think we have some comments in the chat. Thank you for sharing and helping explain to us your journey and some of the challenges. And one thing that really stuck out to me was how much you have to do ahead of time, right? As a couple, and versus those who are able to do more of the traditional methods of starting a family. Right. That's another level of stress and complexity that I don't think we all appreciate. And so I really appreciate you sharing that. Why I am interested with our viewers I just saw a comment here. So someone stated, Carl, my husband and I also worked with men having babies, and they have 19-month-old twins. So Matthew, there is definitely, a journey, and it sounds like a successful one out there. We have some questions of you all who are participating. So if you can go into Pathable and select the polls. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. So if you go into Pathables and select polls, the first question we have is, have you explored fertility benefits through your workplace? Sure, that's good. So go ahead and answer real quick. We'll just have it on there for 10 seconds or so. So we're seeing yes, and it's overwhelming. No, it's not applicable to me. No, and I don't know where to start. So go ahead and select your answer here. So again, you go into Pathables, where you would have entered the session, and you select polls, and then you can vote here. And then the other voting questions are below as well. All right, so go ahead. The next question is, have you explored a surrogacy program or other non-traditional means of starting a family? We're kind of interested to hear about who all is listening in today. So while that one's going on, I'll come back to this one here. So have you explored fertility benefits through your workplace? So we have folks where it's not really applicable to them. Some where they don't even know where to start. And then yes, and it's overwhelming. And I think listening to Matthew, I heard a very similar story. All right. So to move us along, I'm going to go ahead and invite Toni Barrington to share with us her own story as it relates to mental health. So Toni, could you share with us a bit about Chevron's employee assistance program in particular, and as well as what your experience was as a queer woman of color? That would be wonderful.
Thank you, Michelle. Hi, everyone. I'm Toni Barrington. And as I said earlier in my introduction, for me, being a queer woman of color, it was important to find an employer who had not only benefits that were inclusive for LGBTQ, but had like resources within their benefit packages that didn't make me feel excluded. So a little bit about my story. And on October 31st, back in 2019, I came to like the head of a major manic episode. So I was in a meeting and I kind of just dazed out. Fortunately, I had a manager who took it upon herself to reach out to our EAP staff that was in the building. And so a little bit of how that works for us at Chevron is we actually have on-site EAP, I call her my advocate, EAP advocates that are available to us they have a floor that they're on. So the EAP advocate came and just kind of made sure that I was okay. She ensured that I had someone to come pick me up and I had to go directly to my psychiatrist's office after that. What ended up happening is pretty much I crashed, and the EAP advocate didn't stop there. What she also did was she got me into what is called the intensive outpatient program, where I took off of work for maybe 11 to 12 weeks to just get me back stabilized and kind of like, I like to tell people, back into general population. So she she didn't stop at that part of the journey. When I returned to work, she was by my side. She met with myself and my manager and lead at the time, my general manager and lead at the time. I didn't have to disclose anything, but I chose to disclose that I had been living with bipolar for, at that time, 26 years. And sometimes you're in mania and you never know, because usually when you're in mania, people will never like to say, hey, I'm in mania, I need to come down, so I need to get on medication. So she was by my side for that part of my journey. I still catch up with her. We have like quarterly catch-ups. Her and I've been working on initiatives throughout the company and I was featured on Chevron has what was called My Story, Our Story. So I was able to be featured on the Our Story with the manager, and we discussed what happened that day from the manager's perspective, the EAP advocate's perspective, and my perspective. So working for a company who not only offers benefits to LGBTQ is important, but having the resources within the company that don't make you feel excluded, that make you, that I can go as a queer woman of color and not feel like feel strange to utilize the resources that we have, is very important for me And at that time, it was very important to me. It's also allowed me to put my family on my benefits, but outside of that, I just feel comfortable being able to discuss things about my family because we're not traditional by any means. So just having that and knowing that my story was kept confidential unless I was willing to share that story, and also working with Chevron as my employer to share the story with regards to mental health, especially as at that time when I came back, we went a few months later, COVID happened and people were just starting to struggle because of so many changes. So being able to share during the time of COVID and just encouraging people to check in on others, do a check-in on themselves, and having the full backing of Chevron so I can bring my authentic self to work has been tremendous. So that's a little bit about my story.
Thank you, Tony. And you know, our EAP professionals, and we're very pleased to have Heather as one of those here on this panel. You know, they do a lot as far as our employee services. And one thing that they've been engaged in very much so is when our employees are transitioning in the workplace. And, you know, we have our transitioning guidelines for the workplace, and working with EAP, we're continuing to be able to learn how we can improve those guidelines, and even also being able to be open and working with those who have transitioned and are willing to share their stories with us. We can help shape kind of what the work experience is for them. And as you mentioned, you know, being able to feel comfortable regarding, you know, expressing your needs as far as, you know, what you need for mental health, and having an advocate. And even though they don't like to be called an advocate, or they don't call themselves advocates, we call them advocates because that's what we feel. And it's a great relationship. And we do have some poll questions on this as well. And then I'm going to ask Heather to chime in a bit about some of her experiences and what she sees. So let me share my screen again. So the first question is around: how likely are you to utilize your company employee assistance program resources? And it's 0, meaning I will never use them, and 5, I use them often. We also have the option, I don't have access to EAP resources through my company. And this could be EAP resources on site or off site. So again, that's your employee assistance program. So go ahead and vote. I'll give you a few moments there. So the majority I'm seeing is that folks are utilizing the resources that are available to them. And we have a small amount that don't have access to their resources. And so, you know, what's great about Out and Equal is you can share with them what you learned during this session, and kind of helping to elevate the importance of an employee resource program or employee assistance program, perhaps that you could have them start at your company. The other question we have is around transgender guidelines. So does your company utilize transgender transitioning guidelines in the workplace for employees? That's something that we're seeing is growing even more, which is fantastic. And that's allowing us to kind of do some benchmarking, right, and understanding and sharing with each other. So we have 46%. I'll give you about 10 seconds or so to answer that one. So for the most part, folks aren't sure if they have them in their workplace, and it's about tied with yes, they do. So again, those transitioning guidelines, at least from Chevron, are on, or I believe you can access them through the Human Rights Campaign website. All right, so with that, I want to go ahead and ask a couple of questions. I'm going to open it up to the panel. And again, if you have questions, or I would also invite, if you have questions that you would like us to ask the panel, please go ahead and add them to the chat, and I will go ahead and ask them. actually, this is a really good question. So Heather, I'm going to start with you. It's from Andrew Meany, and he's asking, do your EAP team work with managers to help them understand what services are available to their staff and work with them to understand when their employee might need assistance?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's a good one. In terms of what services are available, we do have a distinction between EAP and our HR and benefits groups, but we're like partners, so we can help folks partner with the people that they need to partner with in the departments that can, give specific details on our benefits. But as far as, working with the business, working with supervisors and managers, it's something we do frequently to educate them about mental health and just, to help determine when an employee might need help. We consult frequently, and we're happy to help you figure that out. In general, though, some signs that someone might need help are, is the person more tearful, trouble sleeping, over or under eating? Are they isolating too much or feeling overly connected? We call that being enmeshed with others. Are you having more anxiety, trouble breathing, increase in physical symptoms, racing thoughts, or feeling ineffective on the job or in personal relationships? And of course, hopelessness or feelings of suicide ideation, feelings that we don't want to be alive anymore are some of the things that we assess for. We're not expecting you to keep track of all of those things, but just those are some of the things that go through my mind when I'm working with supervisors and managers.
Wonderful. Thank you, Heather, for sharing. I want to circle, there's some really good questions and I will get to them, but I want to circle back real quickly to Matthew. What made you feel comfortable in the first place to reach out to one of our executives to ask about your own questions?
Yeah, thanks. So kind of to echo some of Tony's comments about Chevron and the inclusive workplace, I do think part of it has to start with that trust with the company. I'm kind of mid-career now, over 10 years with Chevron. So I think I had at least established myself enough to feel that my job would not be at risk. I would not have any sort of retaliation. I wasn't a year or two in. I had a better understanding of the company culture, how people worked, how the organization worked. So I think that was part of it at a personal level. But the Chevron culture as a whole, we do see a lot of visible discussion and support of diversity and inclusion. From the ERGs, from the executive leadership. And so why I reached out to this particular leader, he was actually also the executive responsible for our COVID-19 response. So I had never talked to him or worked with him before, but I saw many emails, town halls with him discussing, what we are doing as a corporation, in response to COVID-19 with ever-changing information and conditions. And the way that he communicated and carried himself when he was faced with difficult questions from people in the workforce, he was very receptive. He was transparent if he didn't know, but he also committed to finding answers and updating people as soon as he was able to. So I felt that he was a good point of contact to start with. Also, he was the executive sponsor of the Pride Network. So I knew that he had that connection with the ERG. So at the very least, I felt that he was a good starting point to be receptive to what I had to say. And even if he wasn't the right person to start with, he would be able to point me in a direction where I could hopefully continue this conversation further.
Yeah, thank you. And part of that was us reaching out to Anne. And so Anne, I'm wondering if you could share with us a bit, what is the overall process of, I guess, on your side, on how we identify benefits? And if you can kind of give us an idea, and this is what part of the learning was for us.
Sure. So before I give sort of a simple overview of benefits in terms of what the design process looks like for us, I just want to mention that Chevron does offer competitive pay and benefits. It's designed to attract, retain, and motivate our workforce. And our philosophy as we design things is to be competitive in aggregate, generally within a country. So again, we operate in over 50 countries, and so we'll be talking kind of more specifically about the United States. So we're looking at what the aggregate package is. And I do want to remind people, like, why do companies provide benefits? So for us, a couple important aspects is to protect employees and their family during difficult circumstances. When you're sick, when you're injured, are examples of those. Definitely to keep our employees healthy and safe. That's a big emphasis at Chevron. And also it helps, our benefits can help employees make transitions from being an active employee to a retiree. And we do have a set of guiding principles. One of the guiding principles is that we do share the risk between the company and the employee. So it doesn't mean that, it means, you know, that sometimes there's a cost sharing for different kinds of things, depending on what they are. So to answer the question, Michelle, more specifically, our benefits design process has sort of three main chunks to it. So the first one is really to understand the needs. And so that's what we're doing with the Pride Network here. We're anxious to see what the survey results look like to understand sort of collectively, you know, what the needs are. And then we go through a process of benchmarking. We have industry-specific benchmark companies, and then we also look at more broader industries of global companies that are large like ours that may be based in the US. And then thirdly, depending on what the needs are, we may need to be checking in the marketplace for providers. And if a provider is needed, then we may end up conducting a request for proposal, you know, looking at alternatives and looking at the best fit for us. And so all of this goes into then the last step is really an analysis process, kind of looking at everything, you know, what are the solutions, what are the costs, et cetera, and developing a proposal that's in line with our guiding principles. And then that in turn would go up to management for approval. So that's the high level.
All right, wonderful. Thank you, Ann. So, you know, one thing that Ann did mention is that we're looking primarily in the United States. And as mentioned in a chat, you know, there are countries where it is illegal. Sometimes they even have the death penalty for being LGBTQ. And those are interesting challenges that we need to navigate. And so a lot of it, at least what's been shared with me is, you know, we are a guest in the countries. And so those are kind of we have to abide by their laws and regulations. And so that is part of our journey. And it's better to be present and have the ability to influence than to completely not be present at all. So that's just kind of a comment that I'll make on one of the questions in the chat. The other question I had was, you know, we mentioned a bit about some of the resources that are available. I guess, Tony, how did you learn about what resources were available to you?
You know, when looking for an employer, Chevron on our external website lists the different types of benefits. I've been familiar with EAP and other companies, but really never had to use it. And even this time around, my manager saw, and I have to thank her for this, but the manager I had at that time saw that I needed help, that I was in mental distress. So she actually reached out to the EAP, my EAP advocate, which, yeah, I still call her that, but she reached out to her, and then that facilitated the relationship. So I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that the manager was at least had enough courage to go ahead and do so, because I know some companies may not always be as supportive to the management in doing something like that. But I know, like, just knowing that the person that I still keep in contact with from EAP, just to kind of even just show you now, like almost 2 years after what happened, I was looking for a particular type of therapy that I decided to go through. She was even willing to find me a therapist. So she still followed up. She gave me a list of different people who specialize in that particular therapy, EMDR. So the relationship still goes. And I remember her telling me, look, I'll be with you to the end of your career at Chevron or until the end of mine. So, you know, we're still hanging strong. And I do want to also, you know, acknowledge Heather, because Heather also comes from the EAP part, but also has, you know, an amazing story as being an ally in that space, in this space, because of, you know, her connection, her son, but as well as just being an employee. So just knowing that we have people like Heather on the team just helps so much. And knowing that the information is kept confidentially, because not only do they work for Chevron, but people like their counselors, their licensed therapists, you know, things like that. So they won't break code, you know, by sharing your story, you know, illegally. So just to give Heather a shout out too.
Yeah, and there's a question in here. Lloyd Clausen asks, you know, he's like, I know many struggle to ensure that EAP meets the needs of our diverse workforce. You know, is there any tips on how to ensure this? And you know, one thing I think about is sharing of stories and connecting. And Heather, I'm wondering if you could take a time to share a bit about kind of your personal connection with pride and mental health, and if you would share that with us, and how that, and I guess how that supports you on your effectiveness as an EAP counselor.
Sure. First of all, I just have to say how touched I am. I'm going to be transparent here, how touched I am by the stories that I'm hearing today. I'm so grateful to be here. So I'm not just an EAP advisor or advocate, as Tony refers to us, but I'm also an ally. I raised a son who was gay, and I knew from the time he was about 8 years old. And he lived in a family that wasn't perfect, but we loved him unconditionally. And it was very important to me that he knew that if he were gay, it was a non-issue for us. As he entered puberty, things got so rough for him out in the world. He was bullied terribly at school. And, you know, coupled with an already shaky self-esteem, it really pushed him over the edge. Now, in the 90s, there weren't LGBT councils in schools, and hatred was very tolerated. So my son, his name was Alex, had severe depression starting at the age of 12, and he had his first suicide attempt a year later. I remember sitting him down and telling him that I loved him unconditionally, and if he was gay, it was a-okay, that I would support him in whatever way he needed, and I would never take my love away. So I expected a positive response from him, but instead I got a screaming, tearful denial. And this is when I first learned about internalized homophobia. It just broke my heart that I couldn't take that shame from him. And so I became very interested in how stigma impacts people in the LGBTQ community. Unfortunately, my story ended sadly with my son taking his own life at the age of 21. The impacts of stigma and oppression across all areas of diversity is a personal and a clinical interest for me. And I really try to look with curiosity at all of the ways in which a person's experience may impact them in the world. And when it comes to mental health, you know, we as a society tend to cringe. We don't want to talk about it. It's shrouded in mystery and secrecy, but it shouldn't be. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness, but of strength. And mental health is fluid for every single one of us and is merely part of the experience of being human. So I'm here as a fellow traveler, sometimes as a guide and often as a student.
Thank you, Heather. I always have to pause. I really appreciate you sharing. So one of the questions or something that you mentioned too was feeling safe, right? And you know, how do we support folks around that psychological safety piece? And how can we help, I guess, influence in that space?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking. I noticed there were also relevant questions in the chat around how do I trust my EAP? Really, really good questions. Well, first of all, Here at Chevron, diversity and inclusion is one of our core values. It's part of what was mentioned earlier, our Chevron way. Those are our operating guidelines, our values and principles, and how we are going to show up as a corporation. And that is that we have an inclusive work environment that values the uniqueness and diversity of individual talents, experiences, and ideas. Our EAP group itself represents all the areas of diversity and is led by two very talented African-American leaders. It reminds me of the quote by Verna Meyer, "Diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance." I'm proud that we practice and model inclusion, that we dance here at Chevron. And I think representation is important. Knowing that there are people on our team that have shared your experience can make it safer for you to bring your whole self into the conversation. People that don't feel comfortable to bring their whole selves to work, can't truly feel psychologically safe. And another thing is myself and my colleagues also know what we don't know. So we consult. When I have an LGBTQ case, I consult with an LGBTQ colleague. And yes, we have them on our team. We share resources and referral sources to ensure that our employees get the best experience from our group, no matter which one of us picks up the phone. We have internal on-call EAP advisors that are available 24/7, 365 by way of our hotline. You don't get a 1-800 number, you get one of us. We're all licensed mental health professionals, as Tony said, that are mandated not only by company policy, but also by the laws and ethics of our professions to maintain confidentiality. Most of us are in this work because we truly care about others. So we value that confidentiality and the fact that you share with us what you're going through. And, lastly, we, in 2019, we launched a 3-year corporate-wide initiative called Let's Talk, designed to increase awareness and reduce stigma associated with mental health. So EAP and Work Life created a corporate-wide video, as well as Tony mentioned, the My Story, Our Story series that she personally participated in, as well as other projects which focus on the stories of how our employees are dealing with mental health challenges and concerns in an effort to really address and stomp out stigma. For example, for Pride Month, one of my colleagues shared her personal story. And for Suicide Prevention Month in September, I shared a video interview of my own story of what it was like to lose a son to suicide. So we connect through identification. We're here for you, we get you. And this is a non-judgmental, psychologically safe place for you to explore the emotional side of being you.
All right, thank you, Heather. I want to shift a bit. So we know about our resources at EAP and how we're continuing on that journey and learning from each other. And where we're trying to learn more is the inclusivity around our medical benefits. And so, Anne, I'm wondering if you could share just real briefly some of the challenges that we have in navigating that space.
In terms of navigating benefits. So benefits are, as a lot of people know, highly regulated, especially in the US and UK and some other countries. And so there's a lot of information that's actually out on our website. And I think it's a balance and a struggle that we'll put information out there, but we're not sure that it gets picked up. And so what we're trying to shift to is sort of the just-in-time model, like where can we put things so when people need something, they can get access to it easier, because there's so much out there. And it's back, I think the poll question said, where do you start? And so there's a lot out there. Some of what we have to produce we have a self-funded plan is driven by government regulations. And so maybe it looks, it's supposed to be user-friendly information, and sometimes it doesn't feel that way. It feels, whatever, very technical and medical. And yet that's us meeting the laws that we need to. So we're on a constant journey to try to figure out what the best places are and, where we can put things. And in the company, we do have, by countries, different websites. And so where relevant, each organization, each country has a place where you can go to and look for their benefits.
Yeah, thank you for asking a bit about the different countries. So there's a couple of questions in the chat about, how could we navigate to other international locations as far as benefits go. And I know that's an area we haven't quite explored yet as far as LGBTQ inclusivity. But that is, we have to figure out what we're doing here first, right? And then we can
Exactly. Yeah. I think each company, right, addresses that differently because, again, as stated earlier, the laws are different. I think you said that, Michelle, in each country. So, we have to respect that. And so where, there is support of LGBTQ+, then those countries, right, have information about that. And I know our Pride Network, actually, I believe we have something on our website that for our own population kind of shares where there's friendlier, countries than not. So if people are looking for expat assignments or something like that, there is a place to go to look for that.
Yeah, and someone's a question about the Philippines. We do have a Pride chapter in the Philippines, in Manila, and I believe there has been some regulatory movement in that space. And so I welcome you to contact me or Brian Redman, who's our current Pride president, and we can direct you to one of our chapter leads who is navigating that space. We're basically almost out of time, but real quick, Matthew, I wanted to give you an opportunity if you could share real quickly some of the nonprofit resources that you've been using or that you've kind of found on your journey here.
Sure. Yeah, I did see some folks in the comments also mention men having babies, so it seems like it's been a good resource for many folks. So that is the main one I've really leveraged. Again, they have a great information on different agencies and clinics and legal agencies as well, understanding the process as a whole. There's also a few, I guess, more organizations around advocacy. So I think one of them was Carrot Fertility that I've come across, and what their goal is to really engage with HR and benefits in organizations and help them kind of scope out at least a starting point if companies do not have inclusive benefits for LGBTQ employees. So those are two that I've come across that were great resources for me. And they're both nonprofits and are certainly, you can engage them on your own or work with someone at your company to do so. But yeah, hopefully that gives some steps forward for those that are trying to move it forward in their own organizations.
Wonderful. So before we wrap up with our key takeaways and what we want to impart on others as they leave today, I want to take a moment for our participants to share. What did you hear today? What are some of the key takeaways that you're going to that you learned here? What are you going to walk away with? From after attending this session? I know that's something that we really challenge our participants to think about when they attend a session. So based on what you heard, we're interested to hear what did you learn? So again, you would do that through the poll on Pathable. And we have a couple of key takeaways here already. One is my company needs more inclusive fertility programs and coverage. Mental health advocates are a thing, and I'll be pushing for that in my company. Didn't realize that the LGBTQ community has so many challenges around starting a family, and really the importance of mental health and support. And that goes through all aspects, right? In the chat here, they're going to take the time to share this experience with their VP of their human resources. Chevron's a great company. Yes, I agree. It's still here. What else do we have here? The importance of advocates. Fertility benefits can be hard to understand. And so what can we do to help increase some of that transparency? And our own stories are powerful to help with that stopping of stigma in this space, which I think, Heather, that's something that you continue to advocate for. All right. I want to go ahead and open it up to our panelists here. So I'll start with Tony. If you could go ahead and mute yourself, and just what are a few takeaways you want people to walk away with?
I want people to walk away with, at these times, especially, mental health is mental wealth. If you don't feel like your employer is providing what you need in the way of resources, then consider other employers that do your research, and also research what your company does have to offer. Sometimes we just think that we get that regular cafeteria package and that's it, but there's a lot of employers now are offering different options to ensure that their employees have good mental health. And I just want to tell people, like I say all the time, it's okay to say you're not okay if you're struggling with any type of mental challenge. If you just feel like you're burnt out, want to give up, reach out to someone. Just reach out and get help. And just remember, it's okay to say you're not okay. And mental health is mental wealth. And thank you.
All right, Matthew.
Yeah, I guess I'll just say I didn't realize the importance of visibility before starting this journey. You know, something may happen out of my story at Chevron, something may not. Either way, I felt it was important to get it out there. Certainly, as I'm going through my journey, and I know the challenges it takes to change benefits, especially with the legal landscape. You know, it may not apply in my situation, but I felt it'll be necessary to make that change and to have that conversation. And as challenging as it can be, it's just so important to engage others and have the support networks, be it friends, family, community, because it is a journey. And to Tony's point, we all struggle with different things. So just find someone that you feel comfortable to reach out to so that they can help with some of that burden.
All right, Anne.
Yeah, a couple takeaways. I think I'm going to build on what Tony and Matthew said. You know, be brave, speak up. You know, what are your needs? And that HR and benefits and EAP are partners on the journey. In the benefits area, laws do vary by country and state, so that it's not going to magically change overnight. And so, as long as there's measured progress, over time, that we can work to prioritize and figure out what we need to do together.
All right, and Heather.
Yeah, a few takeaways. I think I just, something for managers and supervisors, because I noticed some unanswered questions in the chat around that. What can we do to create psychological safety, which is creating a safe place for our employees to bring themselves, their whole selves to work? It's not super hard. Talking, communicating, opening a door, asking open versus closed questions. Using curiosity, being interested in their experience, and empathy. Empathy is so much more than a buzzword. It's the glue that holds together all relationships, including therapeutic relationships. And there have been so many studies to evaluate the effectiveness of various therapeutic modalities, and they consistently cite the relationship as the most important factor. So that's something that you can control. You can model that. Like Maya Angelou said, people will forget what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And being an ally isn't about what you know, it's about, being curious and just opening your heart to your employees. And for the employees, I like to reframe "you need help" to "you deserve support." You shouldn't have to go through this alone. Our traumas are like an invisible knapsack full of heavy rocks. And when we talk to someone about those, we take one of those heavy rocks out and we explore it in a safe environment, and then we're able to put it down.
I want to thank all of you for participating in this session today, and to our panelists. Thank you so much for all your honesty and sharing your knowledge. And thank you all, and enjoy the rest of the summit.